Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this EPC Elections Monitor to discuss today the results of yesterday's legislative elections in France. It is fair to say that they came as a surprise for most people, as the far-right Rassemblement National, the national rally, not only failed to secure, as was expected after the results of last week's first round, so they failed to secure an absolute majority, and even came only third with only 143 seats out of 577 in the National Assembly. The big winner appears to be the left-wing coalition, the New Popular Front, with 184 seats, while together the centrist coalition linked to President Emmanuel Macron obtains 164 seats. So what we see now is a French National Assembly which is divided in three blocks, and none of them has a majority in the House. So it will be difficult to form a government, and that's what we will discuss now. So how can we explain these results? What do they mean for France and of course for the EU? What kind of government will be possible now with this hung parliament after the decisions of Emmanuel Macron to dissolve the National Assembly? What will be the impact of the situation in France on the EU, on EU policies, on questions like NATO or the support to Ukraine? And last, but certainly not least, what will happen with Emmanuel Macron, the president, who decided to dissolve the parliament and who now will have most probably to govern with political forces that are not aligned with him. To discuss that, we are happy to welcome three French experts. First, Elise Bernard, Head of Studies at the Robert Schuman Foundation in Paris. Then Marc-Olivier Padis, the Director of Studies at Terra, another think tank. And third speaker today, Sophie Dupuy, who is a journalist, an EU political reporter in Brussels for the news website Contexte. I will start with Marc-Olivier Padis. Well, the question will be simple. It's a surprise, these results. So how do you explain the defeat of the Rassemblement National, and what can we expect in the coming days or weeks with this left-wing coalition being first, but far away from an absolute majority? So Marc-Olivier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for your invitation. Yes, to explain the surprise, I guess I have to get back very quickly to our electoral system, because we have a two-round system, which is a bit weird. It's how we call it, first past the post majority system with two rounds, and generally you only have two candidates in the second round, but in certain situation you can have three-way races. And after the first round, we had a situation with more than 300 three-way races, which is very unusual and which would have been very good for the national rally. So within the week, there were many negotiations to withdraw candidates and to get back only to two candidate race. So we went from more than 300 three-way races to less than 90. And then the second thing is that the voters are invited to make what we call in France a Republican front, which is a way to block the road to the far right. And that happened, you know, for Emmanuel Macron within the presidential election. People voted for him twice because they didn't want Marine Le Pen to become president. So many people, including myself, said, well, this time it will not work, because people, you know, they want to vote for their candidate and they don't want to hear about this Front Républicain anymore. But in fact, it worked once more. And people from the left voted for a candidate from the right and the presidential majority, let's say. And people from the right voted for candidates of the left coalition. For example, just one example, Elizabeth Borne, the former prime minister, was re-elected with the voices of voters from the left who demonstrated weeks and weeks against her pension reform last year. So it's a difficult situation for voters, you know, to vote for the other political force, but it was the condition to block the road to the far right, and it worked.
So how do you, sorry, Marc-Olivier, how do you explain the fact that this Front Républicain, this blocking tactic for the Rassemblement National worked this time? Because more and more people were saying, and we saw that 2 years ago with Macron, that there was a fatigue of this Front Républicain. So do you think this time the stakes were so high that people mobilized? What was the driver of this voters' mobilization yesterday?
Yes, I must say that, for example, the turnout was very high, 67%. It's the highest turnout since 97. So it's really very. So as you said, the stakes were very high, and also so really it was it was a real threat that today the National Rally could have won a majority. And the second thing, I think, is that during the week, people realized that candidates from the National Rally were indeed never changed their political vision. In fact, you know, Marine Le Pen knew that it was important to hide, so to say, what the MPs from the National Rally had in mind. So they told her, she told them, sorry, just wear a tie and shut up. And that's what they did in the parliament. But now for the election, we heard people, and we heard, you know, really xenophobic statements and so on. So they appeared to be as radical as we know they are, in fact.
And on the other side, the left appeared quite organized to get elected and to be a strong alternative to the Rassemblement National and even to the Ensemble, so the Macron's allies bloc. How do you see this Nouveau Front Populaire, this left-wing coalition, how strong it is now that it came first in the elections, but far away from the absolute majority? What can it do now?
Yes, you're right. I think it was a surprise for Emmanuel Macron because he thought that the left would be couldn't unite so quickly and appear with a program. But it's rather an electoral program. So what can happen today? It's an interesting situation because for some years now, the major force within the left was the radical left with Jean-Luc Mélenchon. But yesterday, the Social Democrats and the Greens appeared to be in a better situation. For example, the radical left, Mélenchon, La France Insoumise, gained only one MP in the election, when the Socialist Party doubled its result. So the relations within the left is changing a bit, and the great question is it possible to make a coalition without Mélenchon, without the radical left, and only with the socialists, the Greens, and the center with Macron. I think it's the most probable coalition that we can get.
And so the question is, how much time will that take? Probably we have to also look at the French system, who nominates, who chooses the prime minister, and how coalitions are made. It's something that France is not used to do. Mm-hmm. So can you explain a little bit what can happen just in terms of process in the coming days and weeks to choose first a prime minister or a coalition, or on the opposite, first a coalition and then a prime minister? How can that be done in France?
Well, nobody knows, in fact, really, because we are not used to it. We have a winner-take-all system. And this time, the political parties have to build a coalition. And that's something really new. And even yesterday, for example, Mélenchon said no coalition, and Wauquiez for the Conservatives said no coalition, because we just want our program. So they are really not in this perspective of negotiating, of building consensus and so on. So what will happen on the 18th of July? The Parliament will meet. So that's the first day, I think, when we will see what will happen clearly. We usually go very quickly in France because there is a majority for the president, or the system is designed to give a clear majority, but this time it's not the case. So we don't really know what will happen, and also there are the Olympic Games and so on. So it's a tricky situation. But I think that so the president shall ask to the leader of the first party to build a coalition. But that's quite difficult. And in fact, the president cannot choose whoever he wants. He must find somebody who is able to build a coalition. And today, nobody knows, in fact, who would be in this position. Maybe someone from the center right, someone from the center of left, or somebody coming not elected, coming from the civil society, for example. But really, we don't know today.
Yeah, so you cannot. I cannot ask you to give us a name of to bet on one name now, or you have an idea of who could fit the job?
Well, I think that if you're looking to the well, I must add one thing, is that the La France Insoumise, the radical left, will divide itself because some MPs have been excluded by Mélenchon because they were a bit criticized. They criticized him. So there is a part of the France Insoumise that will go away, but maybe it will break the party in two. That's not for sure. So there are the left coalition will change in the coming days anyhow. So I would say maybe if you're looking for a center of right personality, maybe Xavier Bertrand, who is the president of the North region, because he won this region against Marine Le Pen, and he has his social right, social gaullist, as we say in France. Maybe in the Socialist Party, Boris Vallaud could be someone because he was close from François Hollande and so on. Or maybe somebody coming from the civil society like Laurent Berger, the former leader of the CFDT, the first, let's say, trade union in France, which is more or less a social democrat trade union.
Thank you, but basically that means that we can have surprises again on sure. And that Macron could choose. And I think the coalition said this morning that they would choose or put forward a candidate to Emmanuel Macron. So let's see what happens. Thank you, Marc-Olivier. Before I turn to Elise Bernard, I just want to add to our viewers that they can ask questions in the chat, and before the end of this discussion, we will take questions, and you will answer the questions. So please do not hesitate to go to the chat of Zoom and ask your questions. Elise Bernard, so I'm turn to you now, and we spoke about forming a coalition, and of course, when you want to govern together, you have to agree on a program. So when looking at the program of the new Popular Front or the Ensemble coalition, the centrist coalition, what can we expect in terms of government, as what would be the flagship policies of this government for France, of course, but also for the EU? Elise.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. The situation in France has changed dramatically. But from a legal point of view, the position of the President of the Republic, Macron, hasn't. What's happening is that since 2017, President Macron has worked with a lot of member parliamentary majority and prime ministers dedicated to Renaissance politics and policies. The political party Renaissance and the head of state, Macron, they were considered powerful thanks to this general alignment. But I have to add that until yesterday, our concern was very much focused on this unprecedented reality, the possibility of a very EU-oriented president with a very Eurosceptic prime minister. Macron wouldn't have been aligned with the political party Rassemblement National. Considering the results which emerged yesterday evening, from a political point of view, Macron will not be able to push forward his liberal ideas anymore. He will probably be stronger in his aim to reinforce, to strengthen France in Europe and Europe in France. That's our opinion. In the Nouveau Front Populaire, there are many Europe-oriented groups, such as Place Publique, such as Europe Écologie Les Verts,
so Place Publique, I will only specify that it is the small party of Raphael Glucksmann, who is an MEP and who led the list of the socialists in the European elections.
And it's very important for the following analysis, this place of Raphael Glucksmann, exactly. And the socialists, and they will back Macron's policy in favor of European rule of law, no doubt about this. European Green Deal, no doubt about this. And solidarity with Ukraine, for sure. It means for the 2.5 next years, the attitude towards Europe will be granted. But we can imagine what we call a cohabitation for the near future, which France has already experienced in the past. This is the most likely scenario this time round. This means the president will be a different political trend from the prime minister, as we have known at the end of the 90s with liberal Jacques Chirac, who had to work alongside socialist Lionel Jospin. For most of European topics, no problem at all, as we can imagine. What have we noticed during the political campaign? To mitigate the prospect of a defeat, the Renaissance party, and to try to block le Rassemblement National, the strategy of the presidential majority was to try to win on the favorite ground of the far right, immigration. Maybe we will find something wrong with immigration topic, even if Prime Minister and President of the Republic are very EU-oriented. What happened in July is that to address this particular concern of the French, according to the several polls of the right wing and the center-right alliance, proposed the creation, in particular, of detention centers at the external border of the EU. And on the left, the Nouveau Front Populaire proposed a much more open program about migration. Among the proposals, we have abolition of the latest immigration laws, creation of legal and secure immigration pathways, or establishment of a climate displaced status. If the vision of the Nouveau Front Populaire and the former presidential majority were opposed each other on the subject, these two alliances agreed on one point: there is no need to amend the constitution to implement their measures, unlike the Marine Le Pen's party. In the case of a majority in the National Assembly, that's the case now, they agree that their measures will be implemented quite immediately when they agree about forming a government. So the question is, Ensemble Political Coalition was having a very rude position about immigration because they were trying to attract some far-wing, right-wing citizens, electors, or are they absolutely, frankly, opposed on every favorable immigration policy? I don't know yet, but we will soon know, because what's happening is that the recent French immigration law adopted, Darmanin immigration law adopted this year, most of the executive decrees didn't enter into force. So it's still very easy to correct their orientation, more or less. So we will probably very soon know if Ensemble is very opposed to open immigration policy or not. And we will probably, it will probably have a result, a very easy, understandable result when finalizing the pact on immigration at the EU level.
So you think migration would be a big topic if there were negotiations between Nouveau Front Populaire and Ensemble? What about economic and social policies? Because some leaders of the Front Populaire said that the pensions reform would have to be removed, and we know that the European Commission was asking not as a requirement for the recovery plan, for instance, but this pension reform was also made to balance or to help contribute to balance the deficit in France. So what do you see in terms of economic policy and its impact on the budget, deficit, debt trajectory of France and the relationship with the EU? What would be the problems there?
The question, the problem is always the same, is to know from where our wealth has to come from. And that's the main opposition between liberals, centrist liberals, and leftist and even ecologist political parties. It's very difficult to say right now, at the very first day after the results. The main opposition will happen with the question of taxing the rich or not. Being very rude and very direct. What about tax the rich? Because the European Commission and the EU legislation acting for a very efficient economic system, it's his role, does not mind if the wealth is coming from citizen contributions, taxes. I mean, the origin of the wealth is not very important. And the main difference now in France is about the opinion between the liberals and the very leftist political parties. So they will have to discuss very intensively about taxation, about cotization, and about, well, how to promote the public funds, the origin of the public funds they have to find. Will have they to change radically what they begun with Renaissance and the coalition ensemble altogether, or will they find a new solution? I think it's not exactly my part, but if you read a little what they are preparing at the EU Tax Observatory, for example, I know they're quite close to Nouveau Front Populaire. We can imagine some new ideas from this side. Maybe they will convince the liberals. Maybe, I don't know, but there will be an issue for sure, for sure.
Okay, thanks. That's a good transition to go to Sophie, because that raises the issue of how to raise new policy proposals at EU level. So Sophie, what I will ask you is, in this cohabitation, it's something that has not happened in France for more than 20 years. So it was, of course, before the current institutional setup with the Lisbon Treaty. How would the French authorities, meaning the president and the government, divide their work at EU level? What kind of impact would that have on the positions of France as a country, as a member state? And also we can have a look at the European Parliament. How would the parties composing the government in France how would they work in the European Parliament? Because they are all in different groups for now. Sophie.
Thank you, Eric, and thanks for inviting me. Maybe first I will start on the council level. From the last cohabitation in the 90s, we had the situation where the president was clearly representing still representing France at the European Council level. So we can imagine that President Macron will continue to represent the French position in the European Council, but then the governments, the prime minister from another party will defend his or her position in the EU Council at the ministers level. So it will be interesting to have two different voices for France in the council, depending if we are at the level of the head of states and government or at the level of ministers. In the EU Council, at the level of the ministers, we were already imagining the scenarios for the far rights, for far-right governments, and we were we journalists imagining the possibility for far-right governments to have a blocking majority in the EU Council by building an alliance with Italy, with Hungary, with Slovakia, with and the Netherlands also now. Now we don't have this scenario anymore. It will be interesting to see depending of the configuration of the new French government, with which other member states the French government could make alliance. But at least we are not in that scenario of blocking files in the EU Council. So that's first the different possibilities in the council, and then in the parliaments. Also, it will be interesting because the French MEPs are not so strong in the groups of the center. The French socialists are stronger than before, but they are just 13 in the second group of the in the European Parliament, in the SND. So they are at the fourth position. So they are behind Italy, behind Spain, behind Germany. So they will have influence in this group, but not as much as other member states. Then, if you look at the ecologists, at the Green Party, the French only sent 5 Green MEPs. So again, this is a really limited influence in this group. Then in the Renew group, the French are still the first, but the Renew group might be the fourth or the fifth group in the European Parliament. So in the 3 big groups of the center, the French influence is not so high. Then the French influence will be high in the groups at the far left and at the far right. So, but traditionally, those groups are not part of the coalition, of the negotiation. For instance, now the negotiation that we have between the main groups and Ursula von der Leyen. So it will be interesting to observe what will be their role, in particular, maybe the role of the left group. But until now, this group was organized. The French MEPs of the left were influenced, but this group was always, not always, but almost always not in the majorities.
Well, you mentioned the socialists, but if they go to government, they would have this momentum of having won the elections, and they would have more political momentum than the German Social Democrats, for instance, or even the Italian ones who are in opposition. So don't you think that this could change their position and influence in the group, and as a consequence also be useful for the government if it is led by the left in France?
Yeah, it will change the position of the French MEPs in the SND. It's sure. We can see, for instance, the example of the Spanish socialists that are that have the power in Spain, and they are leading the SND group with Irache Garcia, the president of the group. So it will definitely change the image of the French socialists, and it will give them more weight, more voice in this group. So I agree with you.
And what about the European Commissioner? Because we saw that Marine Le Pen or Jordan Bardella were saying that they would choose, or they would have the final say or most important word in the selection of the French European Commissioner. So of course now they won't be able to do that. Do you think that, well, how strong is Thierry Breton's position, the outgoing commissioner? Could he be supported by a left-wing or a government or left-center coalition? And what kind of portfolio the left-wing government would like to have? Would they try to get the same portfolio as now, or would there be a shift in priorities, which would have an impact also on the whole structure of the commission?
Yeah, on the commissioner, it's difficult to say how the government will behave, because we don't know which configuration it will be. If we have a government from the center left to the center right, we can imagine that it will support Thierry Breton. Then if we have a government only from the New Popular Front, I don't know. according to what I know, they were not as clear as the National Rally about their wish to nominate someone, to nominate the commissioner. Then I guess that as Marc-Olivier said, that it will take time for the new government to be formed, and normally the names have to be put on the table by the 27th during summer. So maybe this will solve the equation for France, and we will keep Thierry Breton, who was already a commissioner. So maybe even if he's not on the same line with the new government, he has the experience, and he will probably keep a portfolio linked with big priorities of the EU, like industry and internal markets. So I'm not sure that a new government more on the left will change the priorities, because it seems that competitiveness, industry policies, how to combine that with the Green Deal will be one of the biggest priorities for the next mandate, as the defense industry. So this is already in the portfolio of Thierry Breton. So I think, yeah, it can be, I think it can be, we can have a stability for the portfolio of the commissioner.
Thank you very much, Sophie. So we have quite a lot of questions for 23 minutes left. So I'm not sure I will be able to transmit all of the questions, but there are at least two that can be combined together. The first one is, would a coalition of Ensemble, Social Democrats, Ecologists, and so on would get enough deputies or MPs for a majority without LR, meaning the Republicans from the center-right? And also the question of what are the chances for a technocratic government? We know that it has been put forward as an option. So maybe Marc-Olivier can answer first, and then if Elise and Sophie want to add something, you will be able.
Yes, so together, if you have Ensemble, Social Democrats, and the Greens, you can go with roughly around 287 MPs, and you need 289 MPs to have a majority. So if you have you can have this kind of majority, and also you have to keep in mind that the far right and the radical left cannot have a majority to censor the government. So you can have a minority government, and with one or two voices, that's okay. I think that there has been much discussion about the possibility of a technocratic government, but given the result of yesterday, I mean the good result of the left, it seems difficult not at least to try this kind of grand coalition, which would be, I repeat it, something completely new in France. But I think a technocratic government would have no chance in the new political context now.
Elise or Sophie? Or we can take another question if you have nothing to add. Maybe so there is one interesting question on the potential impact on energy policy. We know that Rassemblement National wanted to leave the electricity market. Of course, a left-wing coalition would be more willing to go faster, maybe on climate and energy transition. If there is a coalition with the center, they would have to agree on the objectives. So what can we see as potential impact on energy policy, electricity, the role of nuclear power also in the French energy mix? So I don't know who is the best placed to answer this question. Sophie, Marc-Olivier, Elise? Or is it too early to say?
In the program, sorry, Elise, go on.
Yes, Elise, if you want to start.
It's very early because what I know is only Rassemblement National had a position about this. Because the New Front Populaire, the diverse political parties are quite opposed on these points, so they didn't have any common position about what I know. So there is no answer, as we have noticed, like for immigration, for example, which was the most clear example of opposition between the leftist front and the far right wing. So for the moment, maybe I can check quickly, but
no, in the New Popular Front, the communists are very strong in favor of nuclear power, and the Greens are against, but there is no common position on that matter.
And we know there are plans to build new, smaller nuclear power plants, but it's a long-term project, so maybe they haven't taken position on that. I think during the campaign, so we will have to see. There is a question on President Macron's foreign policy stance. Has he been in a diminished position since yesterday? So basically, maybe I will ask Sophie in terms of who decides on the French foreign policy at EU level, and we can also talk about NATO and probably the specific question of Ukraine. So who will be the decision maker on EU foreign policy? And I would start with Ukraine, of course, because the worries were quite big in case of a win of the Rassemblement National on that issue.
I can start, but I'm curious to hear also what my colleagues can say about that topic. On the EU level, maybe foreign policies will be a good example of how the power will be shared between the presidents and the governments, because there will be a minister in charge of foreign affairs. There will be a minister in charge of EU affairs, but also traditionally the presidents keep competence on foreign affairs and defense, and foreign affairs and defense are discussed also at the level of the European Council. So it will be probably an area, a topic where both parties, presidents and government will try to have a word on that. I guess with a government from the far right, a contradiction would have been obvious, but in this configuration, we don't know exactly what it will be, but there will be differences, but I think they would not be so strong.
Thank you. Elise, we saw in the last days that the French constitution is not so clear on who is in charge of the defense policy, for instance. Maybe it would be easier in the configuration we will have, whatever it is, because it won't be put into question by the Rassemblement National. But what can we expect in terms of defense policy, in terms of, to a wider extent, in terms of foreign affairs?
Yeah, that's what happened during the campaign. if the prime minister, according to the French constitution, Article 20 of French constitution, drive the policy of the nation, shall have at its disposal the civil service and the armed forces. President of the Republic is also, according to the French constitution, in charge of the armed forces. Article 15 says the President of the Republic shall be the head of the armed forces. He shall preside over the higher national defense councils and committees. Consequently, the President of the Republic is the one who represents France at the NATO summits in general. But it's certain that if he engages France in NATO's decision, the prime minister has to agree because of the Article 20. The prime minister shall have at its disposal the armed forces. So they have to be agreed altogether. But we should be clear for our European friends. If Russia attacked Poland or Romania or any other EU country or NATO country, NATO member states, we cannot imagine, even if France is under cohabitation, that the prime minister would refuse to send troops, as Article 5 of the Washington Convention implies. I mean, there's a solidarity principle. It implies that all members should stand in solidarity with those being attacked. I mean, I even cannot imagine under a cohabitation, our double-headed executive power would be disagree. You know, during the cohabitation, Jospin Chirac, it happened, but it was very specific. It was a putsch in Côte d'Ivoire, and Jacques Chirac and Lionel Jospin disagree about the fact to have the regime, the official regime or not. But it cannot be compared with what's happening at the EU frontiers in Ukraine. So I don't think it will change it. For sure, about EU or NATO, PR and PM has to work together. So they will take their time to choose the PM and the well-constructed government, for sure.
Thanks. Coming back to the reasons. Yes, Marc-Olivier.
Eric, I would like to add just a word, is that it's not only a cohabitation, it's a coalition, which is completely new in France, because we need a coalition getting from the Greens to the Social Democrats to the center of left, center of right, and the Macron majority. So it's a very new situation. And on the one hand, the president is obviously weakened because of this election and because of the fact that he cannot be re-elected again. And on the other side, the government will depend on this strange coalition. So my guess is that the government will not have any possibility to take strong decisions. There will be no very important reforms, and many people just expect that this government deals with the current situation during 1 year, and then in 1 year maybe we will have elections again.
Thanks, Marc-Olivier. That leads me to taking another question and reformulating it because it's about the next elections, the presidential elections due in 2027, in 3 years from now. Of course, the Rassemblement National lost yesterday, but in the longer term, when we look at the number of votes they had last week and even yesterday, is there a possibility that Marine Le Pen would be stronger in 3 years from now than after last night's election? And you mentioned the fact that the government would not be able to decide many things on some issues, and that's one of the problems. If there is no big project, no big measures adopted in the coming years, what will be the landscape for the presidential election. So what is your feeling about the position of the Rassemblement National now and the way their voters will react to yesterday's results and what is going to happen with a likely big coalition?
Do you want me to start?
Yes, please, and then I will ask Sophie and Elise here.
Okay, so I think the far right electors are really frustrated and surprised by the results of yesterday. In a way, the National Rally wasn't really happy to gain a majority because what they prefer is to win the presidential election given the power of the president. And Marine Le Pen, she wants to change the French constitution, in fact, to get her program done. And as a prime minister, she cannot do that, or Bardella cannot do that. So they really want to win the presidential election, and they were not properly defeated yesterday. So they are still in a good position to win the presidential election. So the 3 next years will be very difficult. I just add 2 remarks. The first one is that now there will be a conflict within the former majority of Macron because now everybody will quarrel to know who will be the candidate of the center of right, Edouard Philippe or François Bayrou or whoever, I don't know, or the Minister of the Interior, for example. And the second remark is just to say that the situation changed on the left because for some years now, the left was dominated by Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And I think the situation is changing now because of the good results of Raphael Glucksmann in the European election and the results of yesterday. And so Mélenchon is not anymore the leading man within the French left. And this can change also the perspectives for 27.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elise, go on, please.
I can go further a little. Raphael Glucksmann, for everything we know about its EU implication, action, visibility, communication, closest to France. His name, François Ruffin, sorry, François Ruffin, Marine Tondelier, these new faces, new young quadra, new active, more representative of the French population, probably, more premier ministrable, as we say in French, than Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Yeah, more in a position to become prime minister. Yeah.
Yeah, but the phrase is interesting to adopt, premier ministrable. The other point about Rassemblement National electors is the part of very informed of far-right doctrines electors or not. And I don't think there are so many as we think. Because in the Rassemblement National voters, you have a lot of people who think the EU forgot them or hate them, rural populations in particular. And you have also abstentionists. I think for the second round, a lot of women have voted, and you probably know our excellent study about abstentionism in the female populations. And I think for this second round, women have been voting more intensively than at the first one, because it merged a lot that the Rassemblement National representatives are very against women fundamental rights, and it had changed a lot. So if the information continues running about the fact that this party is very opposed to women fundamental rights, it will not be reinforced within the 3 years. The very last point, I think, is that Rassemblement National electors are very against the EU construction. But if the new government and the new Assemblée Nationale majority promotes properly and in a good faith the good thing that European Union is for them, maybe they will abandon the Rassemblement National orientations. I guess, I really, really hope so, seriously. But it's really necessary for our new French representative to be in a good faith in what brings European Union to the French people. And first and foremost, for the rural populations, because we cannot follow with their lies about what's costing and enriching the EU to France.
Thanks, Elise. And Sophie, looking from Brussels, Rassemblement National is expected to join the new group, Patriots of Europe, created by Viktor Orban. Do you think they have now a more European strategy compared to previously, where they were not very active in the European Parliament? And looking at their program, which is ever evolving on EU issues, do you see a trend, a pattern on what they would like to achieve as if they were in government? Really, what would they like to do for the EU or against the EU for that matter?
Yeah, normally this new group will be presented today in the afternoon. So it will be normally the third group in the European Parliament before ECR and before Renew, with more, I think, of 80 MEPs, something like that. Yeah, so these parties manage to get together. Then we will see how they will work together, because in the last mandates, we already had a consequent group at the far right, the Identity and Democracy Group, ID, but they were not really coordinated. It was really delegation per delegation, not really organized. So it will be interesting to see if there is a change on that. Then on the strategy of the Rassemblement National, also in the last mandate, we had really few MEPs that were from the Rassemblement National that were involved in the European Parliament. I remember maybe just 1 or 2 being really involved on their files. Now we have 30 MEP from the National Rally in the European Parliament. Their program was, as you said, like really ever evolving, but was maybe more developed than before. But it remains a program really for instance, at the institutional level, impossible to achieve. But maybe they will have the capacity to block some files by building majority with ECR and sometimes maybe with EPP. Maybe they will, on some files, manage to build majorities to block files from the Green Deal, for instance, the continuation of the Green Deal. So they might have the possibility to join a majority from the right and the far right on particular files. So we will see.
Thank you, Sophie. And we are at the end of this discussion now. We are running out of time. So thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you very much, Elise, Bernard, Sophie Dupuy from Contexte, Elise Bernard from Robert Schuman Foundation. Thanks, Marc-Olivier Padis from Terra. And thank you to our online audience and for their questions. And well, there is a lot to look at now in France. A lot of suspense, and we will see. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.